If you've ever felt like your goodness is misunderstood, like your kindness gets mistaken for weakness, you're not imagining it. You live in a world where deception is currency and compassion is treated like a flaw, where the louder you scream, the more you're heard, and the softer your heart, the easier it is to break. You've probably asked yourself at some point, am I the fool for still believing in decency? And maybe you've even started to doubt the value of being a good person at all. But what if the very things you're being punished for, your honesty, your empathy, your inability to play the game, are actually signs that you're seeing something others can't, that you're holding on to something this world has nearly forgotten? Fyodor Dostoevsky knew this paradox intimately. He captured it not with arguments or lectures, but with a single character, a man so pure, so painfully sincere, that his presence exposed everything fake around him. His name was Prince Lev Nikolaevich Mishkin, and everyone called him the idiot. You see, Mishkin isn't just a fictional nobleman with epilepsy. He is a mirror, a vessel of untamed goodness placed into a society addicted to its own delusions. He doesn't posture, doesn't manipulate, doesn't pretend. He simply shows up, unfiltered, open-hearted, and lets the truth of who he is speak for itself. And because of that, everyone around him begins to unravel. And that's the tragedy. Because when a good man walks into a room full of masks, his honesty doesn't inspire admiration, it causes panic. Think about that. In The Idiot, Mushkin doesn't fight. He doesn't try to prove he's right. He offers understanding when others expect judgment. He offers love where others expect games. But instead of being lifted up, he's torn down, bit by bit, whisper by whisper, until his very sanity is questioned. And why? Because his presence is unbearable, not to himself, but to everyone else. To be good in a broken world is to become a threat to the illusion. Your gentleness becomes a kind of violence, not because you mean harm, but because you remind people of what they've buried, of what they've traded away for power, approval, or survival. Mushkin never says, I am better than you. He doesn't have to. His existence alone says it all, and that's why they hate him. Just like they hated Jesus, just like they imprisoned Mandela, just like they shot Martin Luther King Jr. History repeats this story over and over again. The pure ones are crucified, not for doing wrong, but for refusing to do wrong, for being the unbending mirror in a hall of funhouse reflections. And when you refuse to bend, the world breaks you. But here's what they don't tell you. Being broken by the world doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't mean you were naive. It means you were real. Realness is rare, and rare things don't survive easily. They're not built for mass production. They don't come with armor or strategy. They just are. And in Dostoevsky's eyes, that's the highest form of humanity. Mushkin walks through rooms of aristocrats who scheme and posture, but he never participates. He doesn't know how. It's not that he's stupid, it's that he doesn't see the point. He sees people, not positions. He sees souls, not status. And because of that, he's labeled a fool. But who's really the fool? The one who sees through the game and refuses to play, or the one who plays it so well they forget it's all an act? This is where you come in. If you've ever walked away from something because it didn't feel right, even when everyone else said it was fine, you've already lived a piece of Mishkin's story. If you've ever been called too sensitive, too idealistic, too soft, you've tasted the same venom the world serves to those it doesn't understand. And let's be honest, being good hurts. Not because goodness is weak, but because it makes you vulnerable. Because you don't lie as easily, you don't manipulate, you don't weaponize love, so you get taken advantage of, you get used, or worse, you get discarded. But here's the brutal beauty of it all. You still choose it anyway. You still choose to show up with your heart open. You still choose to forgive when bitterness would be easier. You still believe there's something sacred in honesty even when it costs you everything. That's not weakness. That's strength most people will never understand. Because while others build fortresses out of ego, you build bridges with your soul. And while they may laugh at you, mock you, call you naive, they'll never forget you. Because something in you reminds them of who they were before the world taught them to be cold. That's the Mushkin effect. You walk into people's lives not with a spotlight, but with a candle, and without saying a word, you illuminate their shadows. You don't judge them, you see them, and in that seeing you unsettle them, and that's dangerous. Not because you're trying to change them, but because they suddenly feel the urge to change themselves. And not everyone is ready for that. So they'll call you foolish, they'll try to pull you down, confuse you, wear you out, but listen closely, let them. Because to be misunderstood by a world that has lost its moral compass is a badge of honor. To be called a fool for choosing love, for telling the truth, for not exploiting others, that's not foolishness. That's clarity. And you carry it, even if it costs you, even if it isolates you, even if it breaks you. Because somewhere deep down you know the world doesn't need more strategists, it needs more souls. There's a reason stories like this stay with us. They awaken something ancient in the soul, a quiet memory, a whisper that says, you were never meant to fit in, you were meant to stand out, not through force or flash, but through the weightless presence of truth. Prince Mishkin doesn't fight the world, he simply exists in it, like a note out of tune in a symphony of performance, and that dissonance is painful, not just for him, but for everyone around him, because when someone refuses to lie, those who rely on lies feel exposed. When someone offers unconditional compassion, those who barter love feel threatened. And when someone lives without masks, those who are made of masks begin to crack. People don't reject Mushkin because he's wrong. They reject him because he makes their reflection unbearable. You've seen it too. You've probably walked into a room and felt the air shift, not because you were loud, but because your presence made noise without sound. Maybe someone looked at you too long, or someone else avoided your gaze entirely. Maybe they mocked you, or labeled you too good for this world. They weren't insulting you, they were revealing themselves. Because when someone truly good shows up, the room starts rearranging, unspoken rules start breaking, pretenses fall apart, and what's left is uncomfortable, but it's real. That's what made Dostoevsky's creation so radical. He didn't craft a hero with power, he crafted one with purity. He gave us a man who wouldn't defend himself, wouldn't lie to be accepted, wouldn't climb over others to survive, and because of that, the world broke him, slowly, quietly, relentlessly. And it's not just a literary tragedy, it's a psychological truth. You live in a world that runs on cognitive dissonance. People convince themselves that their behavior is noble when it's selfish, that cruelty is justified, that manipulation is survival. But when you show up with unshakable kindness, you break the spell. You make them confront themselves. And that confrontation is unbearable. So they attack the source. They call you foolish, not because you are, but because calling you foolish is easier than changing. This is why truly good people suffer, not because goodness is a flaw, but because it creates tension, it creates mirrors, and most people can't handle what they see when they look into one. That's what Prince Mishkin was, a mirror in human form. And not a flattering one, not one that tells you what you want to hear, but one that reflects you back with terrifying clarity. He doesn't speak in speeches, he speaks in stillness, in soft words, in inconvenient truths. And what's more threatening than someone who sees right through you and loves you anyway? The world doesn't know what to do with that. So it breaks him. But here's the deeper paradox. He doesn't resist. He absorbs the chaos, the pain, the betrayal, not out of weakness, but because fighting it would mean becoming it. And that's the hidden strength. To be good in a world that punishes goodness and still choose to be good, that is spiritual rebellion. That's a fire most people don't carry, because most people want results, they want payoff, they want applause for their virtue. But intrinsic goodness doesn't need an audience. It's not a performance, it's a presence. It doesn't shout, "Look at me." It whispers, "I see you." And that whisper is louder than any scream. Dostoevsky didn't write The Idiot as a guide to win in society. He wrote it as a warning, a prophecy. He saw what happens when a man chooses light in a room full of people addicted to shadows. He gets devoured. But that's not the end of the story. Because even in his unraveling, Mishkin changes people. Not all of them, but some. He awakens something, plants a seed that won't bloom right away, but it's there, buried in the soil of memory, waiting, growing, quietly dismantling the walls people built around their hearts. You've done this too. You've left traces in people you'll never see again. Someone who still remembers the way you looked at them with compassion when no one else did. Someone who still carries the echo of your kindness like a secret they don't know how to explain. You may not know it, but you've already shifted lives. That's what real goodness does. It doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't broadcast its impact. It leaves imprints. Soft, subtle, unforgettable. And that's why it's dangerous. Because it can't be bought, it can't be predicted, it can't be controlled. It just is. And when something just is, it threatens everything that pretends to be. This is why Prince Mishkin, though misunderstood and ultimately broken, is not defeated. Because while the world mocks the good man as a fool, the soul recognizes him as a prophet, as a compass, as a rare glimpse of what it means to be human without armor. It's easy to be clever. It's easy to be popular. It's easy to survive by playing the game. But to choose to be honest when it costs you, to be kind when you get nothing in return, to forgive when it would be easier to hate, that is power. A power so rare it's mistaken for foolishness. But you know better, because somewhere inside you've felt it. You've lived it. Maybe you're living it now, walking through a world that doesn't understand you, choosing truth in a world that rewards lies, loving people who don't know how to love you back, and wondering if it's worth it. It is. Not because it always feels good, but because it's real, because it's you, because you wouldn't recognize yourself if you became like them. That's the choice Mishkin made, not the easy one, the true one, and that's the choice you make every day you decide to keep your heart open. Especially when it hurts. Especially when they call you a fool. Especially when you feel alone, because that path, though painful, is sacred. And somewhere, even if they can't admit it, the very people who mock you wish they had your courage. It's a strange kind of courage, isn't it? The courage to remain open, to continue choosing empathy when your instincts scream for self-protection, to keep seeing the humanity in others even after they've failed to see it in you. It's not flashy, it doesn't get celebrated, but it's one of the most powerful forces in existence. Because the truth is, goodness doesn't need validation to be real. It doesn't need applause to be right. It doesn't vanish just because it's unrecognized. It endures quietly, steadily, like water carving its way through stone, leaving its mark not by force, but by presence. Prince Mishkin wasn't naive. That's the lie people tell themselves when they can't understand someone who doesn't live for manipulation. Mishkin saw everything. He understood more than the people around him realized. He just chose not to weaponize his awareness. He didn't play politics. He didn't cloak his kindness in irony. He didn't pretend to be harder than he was. And that's what terrified them. He didn't have an angle. He didn't want anything. He wasn't performing. He was just being. And in a world where identity is curated and virtue is transactional, that kind of being is unbearable. Because it makes people ask themselves questions they're not ready to answer. What do I hide behind my charm? What do I sacrifice for approval? What parts of myself have I buried just to belong? That's the cost of encountering real goodness. It doesn't judge you, but it dares you to look at yourself. And when you're not ready for that, you call it foolish. But you're not here to fit someone else's definition of wisdom. You're not here to shrink so others feel comfortable. You're not here to trade your depth for acceptance. If you were, you wouldn't feel this way. You wouldn't feel torn between protecting your heart and honoring it. You wouldn't ache the way you do after giving your best to people who never understood the gift. But that ache is proof you're still alive. That pain you carry, it's not weakness. It's the evidence of a heart that refuses to harden, a heart that still believes, still hopes, still sees light in the cracks, even when the world turns dark. That's what makes you dangerous, because you refuse to disappear, you refuse to become like them, you keep showing up as you are, gentle, honest, vulnerable, and in doing that you remind people that there's another way to live, even if they can't follow you there, even if they never say thank you, even if they leave you standing alone in the middle of your truth. You keep standing, because you know what happens when you stop. When you silence your truth, it eats at you. When you wear the mask long enough, you forget who you were before it. And when you numb your heart to stop the hurting, you lose the very thing that made life worth living in the first place. So you choose the pain, not because you enjoy it, but because it's honest, because it keeps you human, because it keeps you whole. And maybe that wholeness costs you status or power or relationships, but it gives you something far more valuable. It gives you integrity. It gives you peace. It gives you yourself. That's what Mushkin died with. Not success, not admiration, but peace. Even in madness, even in the ruins of his life, there was still a purity that the world couldn't touch, because it never came from the world in the first place. It came from within, and that's where yours comes from too. No system can give it to you, no ideology can manufacture it. It's not a brand or a belief or a checklist of moral points. It's something deeper, something older, a knowing, a resonance, a flame, and no matter how many times the wind tries to blow it out, it relights itself. That's who you are. Not a fool, not a failure, not a fragile soul in a world too sharp to hold. You are the reminder, the signal, the silence that makes the noise unbearable. You are the living contradiction to everything society says is necessary for survival. And because of that, you survive differently. You survive through compassion, through presence, through the quiet power of not giving up on love, even when it doesn't give back, even when it breaks your heart, even when it forgets you. You keep loving, you keep caring, you keep showing up with your arms wide and your armor thin. Because something inside you knows, deeply, that this is the only way to stay awake in a world trying to lull you to sleep. That's not foolishness. That's clarity. That's courage. That's truth. And yes, it's lonely sometimes. You might walk alone more often than not. You might feel like no one really sees you, like your language is foreign, your values outdated, your softness misread. But that loneliness, that ache, is the echo of something sacred. It's the cost of remembering who you are in a world that's forgotten. But don't let the forgetting change you. Don't let the noise convince you that silence has no power. Don't let the cruel ones define what strength is. You already know. You've always known. And even if they laugh, even if they roll their eyes or call you weak or tell you to grow up, they'll remember you. They'll remember the way you made them feel when they didn't deserve your grace. They'll remember the light in your eyes when you could have gone dark. They'll remember that in a world of endless mirrors you were a window, and through you they caught a glimpse of something real. That's why your goodness matters, not because it's rewarded, but because it's remembered. Because it lingers, because it plants seeds in the cracks where nothing should grow, and one day, maybe long after you're gone, those seeds will bloom in someone else's chest, and they'll wonder why they feel braver, why they feel softer, why they feel something they thought they'd lost forever. And it will be you, still speaking, still loving, still being, even in your absence, because goodness, when real, is never wasted. It transcends, it ripples, it becomes legacy. You might not feel like you're changing anything. You might wonder if your goodness even matters when the world seems so loud, so cold, so fast to forget. But just because something isn't seen doesn't mean it isn't real. Just because no one claps when you choose grace doesn't mean it didn't shift something in the fabric of reality. Sometimes the most profound impact you'll ever have is one you'll never witness. You weren't made for spectacle. You weren't born to impress. You weren't placed here to perform. You were meant to remind. To walk quietly into spaces that have forgotten what tenderness feels like and leave behind a trace of warmth so soft it doesn't get noticed until long after you're gone. And that trace, that energy, that's what changes people. Not through force, but through remembrance. You remind them what it feels like to be seen, to be forgiven, to be accepted without conditions. That kind of presence is more revolutionary than any protest, because it doesn't just challenge systems, it challenges the soul. That's what made Mushkin so disruptive. He didn't break the rules, he made them irrelevant. He didn't fight the game, he made people question why they were playing in the first place, and that's why they couldn't tolerate him, not because he was weak, but because he threatened their illusion of strength. He threatened the systems built on pride. He unsettled the hierarchies fed by ego. He walked into the room like a wound, uncovered, unprotected, and everyone who saw him felt something in themselves begin to ache. Because deep down, they remembered. They remembered a time before they hardened, before they started lying to survive, before the masks. And in that remembering, they resented him. They resented what they'd lost, what they'd buried, what they'd silenced in themselves just to feel safe. So they blamed him. They called him foolish. They turned him into a cautionary tale. But if you look closely, you'll see he was never the warning. He was the invitation. An invitation to return. To feel again. To be again. To choose again. You've been given that same invitation, not through a book or a sermon or a sign in the sky, but through your own pain, your own heartbreak, your own aching refusal to become numb, no matter how much the world encourages it. That's the secret no one tells you. Your suffering isn't proof that something's wrong with you. It's proof that something's right. It means your heart still works. It means your soul hasn't gone silent. It means that no matter how many times you've been cut down, dismissed, or discarded, there's still something in you that refuses to give up on love, on beauty, on truth. That refusal is sacred. It's what makes you different. It's what makes you dangerous to a world that thrives on conformity. And yes, it's what makes you suffer, but it's also what makes you free. Because when you live this way, open, honest, untamed by fear, you stop being controlled by outcomes. You stop needing approval. You stop waiting for the world to understand you. You become the understanding, and in a world starving for something real, that's more than enough. So don't let the noise confuse you. Don't let the cynics convince you that your softness is a liability. Don't let the world's refusal to receive your light make you question its worth. Your light doesn't depend on being seen, it depends on being true. That's the legacy of Mushkin. Not that he was accepted, not that he was celebrated, but that he remained true to himself in a world that tried to strip that truth away. And yes, it cost him. It might cost you too. But what's the alternative? To betray yourself for the sake of belonging, to wear masks that suffocate your soul, to climb ladders that lead you nowhere. You weren't made for that. You weren't made to win a game you don't believe in. You were made to remember, to remind, to reflect something deeper than the surface allows. And that's what you do, even if you don't realize it. Every time you choose presence over performance, every time you forgive instead of retaliate, every time you sit with someone's pain without needing to fix it, you become the kind of person this world was designed to forget, but secretly longs for. You become what it's missing. And maybe that doesn't come with praise or success or even companionship, but it comes with peace. The kind of peace that doesn't crumble when things fall apart. The kind that hums quietly beneath the noise, waiting for you to return to it. Because deep down, you know. You don't need to change the world to justify your goodness. You just need to be the reminder that it's still possible. That even now, after all the heartbreak, all the loss, all the reasons to stop, you haven't stopped. You're still here, still breathing, still loving, still choosing the harder path because it's the truer one, and that matters. Not because it gets noticed, but because it gets felt. By the stranger you smiled at without knowing they were on the edge. By the friend you forgave without needing an apology. By the person you stood beside when everyone else walked away. Those moments, they're invisible, but they're eternal. They don't fade. They echo. They root themselves in memory and soul and time, and when someone someday finds themselves breaking, they'll remember you. They'll remember the way your presence felt, and maybe, just maybe, they'll choose to remain open too. That's how you win in a world like this. Not by dominating, not by becoming louder, not by hardening, but by remaining soft, resilient, whole, even when everything around you says it's foolish, because maybe being foolish is exactly what this world needs. Not the foolishness of ignorance, but the foolishness of radical hope, the foolishness of loving when it doesn't make sense, the foolishness of believing in people who've forgotten how to believe in themselves. That's not delusion, that's power. And you hold that power, even now, especially now. It's easy to forget that power doesn't always look like what we've been taught. Sometimes it whispers instead of shouts. Sometimes it walks away instead of fighting. Sometimes it loves people who don't know how to receive love, and sometimes it looks like losing. Because in a world addicted to performance, winning is everything, but you've seen what winning costs. You've seen what people become when they trade their soul for approval. And even if no one says it out loud, you can feel it. That hollow success, that brittle happiness, that ache under the surface that never goes away. But you're different. Because even when you've been tempted to close off, to protect yourself, to become like them, you haven't. You still look people in the eye. You still care when it would be easier not to. You still cry when the world calls you too sensitive, and you still tell the truth even when your voice shakes. That's not weakness. That's devotion. Devotion to something deeper than reward, deeper than recognition, deeper than comfort. It's the kind of devotion that Dostoevsky carved into every line of The Idiot. A devotion to truth, to beauty, to the sacredness of suffering, because in a world that celebrates strength without vulnerability, Mushkin's suffering was his sanctity. It was proof that he hadn't sold out, that he hadn't compromised, that he still felt everything even when it hurt too much to hold. And that's the kind of soul you carry, a soul that hasn't been numbed by the noise, a soul that still hears the quiet. The truth is, we've been trained to fear that kind of openness. We've been taught to associate emotion with danger, compassion with naivety, vulnerability with risk. But what if those very things are the doorway? What if they're not the weakness, but the wisdom? What if you're not behind, you're ahead? What if being misunderstood is the price of seeing clearly? Because you do see clearly. You see through the surface. You feel energy before words. You notice when someone's pretending, even if they don't realize it themselves. And sometimes that gift feels like a curse, because you can't unsee the truth. You can't forget the softness in someone's voice just before they harden again. You can't ignore the grief in someone's smile when they say they're fine. You carry all of it, but not because you want to, because you're built for it. You're built to carry what others bury, to name what others avoid, to feel what others escape. And yes, it's exhausting, it's isolating, it's heavy, but it's also holy. Because the world doesn't need more people who've mastered the system. It needs people who can see through it, who can soften the sharp edges of this life just by being who they are, who can walk through fire without turning to stone, who can be called foolish and still choose love anyway. That's what it means to be good, not to be perfect, not to be praised, but to be real, to be rooted in something deeper than public opinion or passing trends, to live from the inside out, not the outside in, to know who you are even when no one else does. And yes, that means walking alone sometimes. That means being misunderstood. That means letting go of the dream that someone will come along and make it all make sense. Because maybe no one will, and maybe that's okay, because you're not here to be understood, you're here to remember, and to remind, to carry the light of a truth that doesn't always get seen, but always gets felt. That's what Mushkin did, not through power, not through charisma, but through presence, through his silence, through his tenderness, through the way he kept showing up even as the world dismantled him piece by piece. You don't have to be him, but you do carry the same invitation, to live from the soul, to choose the harder truth over the easier lie, to keep your heart open in a world that profits from closure, and you've already accepted that invitation, haven't you? Maybe not consciously, maybe not with some grand declaration, but in the small moments, the quiet decisions, the times you chose integrity over image, stillness over reaction, love over fear. Those are the moments that define you, not your wounds, not your mistakes, not the times you fell for someone who couldn't see your worth, but the moments you stood in your truth, even when it was cracked, even when no one clapped. That's where your beauty lives, not in how much you achieve, but in how much of yourself you refuse to abandon. And maybe, like Mushkin, that means you won't always win in the eyes of the world. Maybe it means you'll lose things, relationships, opportunities, comfort, certainty, but you'll keep something they'll never have. You'll keep your soul untamed. And one day someone will meet you, someone lost, someone tired, someone on the edge of forgetting themselves, and they'll feel your presence like a pause in the chaos, like a voice they haven't heard in years. And you won't have to say a word, because who you are will speak for itself. And in that moment, they'll remember. They'll remember what they used to believe in. They'll remember what love feels like without conditions. They'll remember that softness doesn't mean surrender, and you'll have given them something priceless, not a lesson, not a lecture, but a mirror. A moment of truth so clear, so kind, that it makes them want to be better, not out of shame, but out of love. That's the gift. That's the ripple. That's the revolution. And it begins with you. Maybe you don't always see the revolution you're part of. Maybe it doesn't look like fire or fury or noise, but it's happening. In the quiet choices, in the gentle refusals, in the way you keep showing up with your heart intact, even after the world has tried to convince you it would be easier to leave it behind. That's the revolution. Not a war against the world, but a reclamation of the self, a silent, sacred vow that says, I will not betray who I am, even if no one claps for it, even if no one comes with me, even if I walk this road alone. Because the road you're on isn't crowded. It's not lit up with neon signs telling you where to go or what to do. It's dim, winding, uncertain. But every step you take is a rebellion against the numbness. Every breath is a prayer. Every act of honesty a spark of light. You're not lost, you're deep. You're on a path most people don't even know exists. And sometimes that depth feels like drowning, like isolation, like being too much for a world that worships surface. But in that very feeling is the proof that you're awake, that you still have a pulse, not just in your chest, but in your soul. You haven't given up on meaning. You haven't collapsed into cynicism. You haven't settled for the shallow safety of being forgettable. And because of that, you see things. You feel things. You sense what others can't articulate. And it's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Because there's nothing more tragic than a life lived entirely in masks. Nothing more painful than a heart silenced by fear. And nothing more beautiful than someone like you who keeps choosing truth anyway. That's what made Prince Myshkin unforgettable. He was not the smartest man in the room, he was not the richest, he had no clever comebacks, no polished armor, just a purity that didn't make sense, a presence that didn't belong. And that's what made him divine. Not divine in the religious sense, but divine in essence, untouched by corruption, unmoved by games, unshaken by what others valued. He didn't need to prove anything, he just was. And the more you let go of needing to be understood, the more you step into that same freedom. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't listening. You stop defending your softness. You stop trying to fit your truth into someone else's story. You just become. Fully, freely, quiet. And in that becoming, something begins to shift. Not just in you, but around you. The way people speak to you. The way rooms feel different when you enter. The way you no longer tolerate anything that asks you to shrink. You start to protect your peace, not out of fear but out of reverence. You stop chasing what doesn't nourish you. You stop watering dead gardens. You realize that just because someone doesn't see your light, it doesn't mean you're not shining. Because you are. And you've always been. Even in the moments you doubted yourself. Even in the seasons you felt invisible. even in the relationships that made you question your worth. Your light was never gone. It was just waiting for you to remember that you are not here to be convenient. You are not here to be palatable. You are not here to be easy to understand. You are here to be real, and real is rarely easy. Real is raw. Real is disruptive. Real is tender in a world that calls tenderness weakness. But it's what the world is starving for. People don't remember the ones who impressed them. They remember the ones who moved them, the ones who held space, who didn't flinch when the truth got heavy, who didn't run when the conversation got quiet, who made them feel like they could breathe again, maybe for the first time in years. You've been that person, maybe without knowing it, maybe without hearing it, but you have. And it's time you honored that. Because you weren't made to be everyone's favorite. You were made to be real, and the real ones are always called fools. Until they're missed. Until someone tries to replicate what can't be faked. Until the noise fades and people start asking, where did the light go? It was you. It's always been you. The one who stayed soft when it would have been easier to go numb. The one who asked real questions when everyone else was pretending. The one who listened deeply, who forgave quietly, who loved anyway. You are the disruption. You are the mirror. You are the echo of what this world tries to silence but can never fully erase. And even if no one says it, your existence is a gift. A gift that doesn't need wrapping paper or applause. A gift that doesn't expire or seek permission. A gift that unfolds every time you choose integrity over ego, presence over performance, compassion over control. And yes, you'll be misunderstood, you'll be mislabeled, you'll be told to harden, to toughen up, to stop caring so much. But in those moments, remember this: the world doesn't need more hardened people. It needs more people who know how to stay open without falling apart. People like you, people like Mishkin, called fools by the world but seen by the soul as sacred. You may not always feel sacred. Some days you'll feel like a mistake. Like a fragment of something that never found its place, like a melody playing in a world that's gone deaf. But you are not a mistake. You are not lost. You are not broken just because you bruise more easily than others. You're not too much because you care, and you're not weak because you cry. The truth is, sensitivity isn't a defect. It's an instrument, a finely tuned system that lets you hear what others miss, feel what others hide, sense what others pretend not to see. And yes, it makes life heavier, but it also makes life deeper, richer, more alive. Dostoevsky didn't write Mishkin to make you feel sorry for him. He wrote him to wake you up, to hold a candle up to the idea that goodness must always be rewarded, or that innocence is a liability to be outgrown. He wrote him as a challenge, a question. What happens when a soul refuses to play by the rules of a game it never agreed to? What happens when someone walks through corruption with open hands and an unguarded heart? What happens is exactly what you already know. They're dismissed, they're rejected, they're called a fool, because they don't adapt to the sickness. They don't evolve into something unrecognizable. They stay pure, and purity is confrontational. It doesn't preach. It just exists. And in its existence it breaks everything false. That's why people called Mishkin a fool. Not because he was wrong, but because he was too right, too sincere, too unwilling to twist himself into something easier to digest. And that's why people have called you the same. Because you show up whole in a world built on fragments. You speak truthfully when silence would make you more popular. You offer grace where others would demand payback, and they don't know what to do with you. Because you're not playing to win. You're not chasing status. You're not trying to manipulate perception. You're just being human, being real, being good, not because it makes sense, but because it's who you are. And that kind of goodness, it's dangerous, not to you, but to the illusion, because it shows people what they've forgotten, what they've traded, what they secretly miss. That's why your presence stirs the waters, why people react so strongly to you. Some will be drawn in, others will recoil. Some will want to be near you just to feel your calm, others will try to shake it out of you. but none of them will forget you. Because when a real soul enters the room, everything else is exposed. And the truth is, not everyone is ready for that. Not everyone is ready for the mirror you become. But that's not your fault. It's not your burden to carry their unreadiness. You are not responsible for their reactions. You are only responsible for your truth. And you've carried it well, even when it felt thankless, even when it went unnoticed, even when it cost you everything. You still carried it, and that is everything. Because at the end of the day, when the world quiets down, and the distractions fade and all the masks are dropped, there's only one question that matters. Did you stay true? Did you keep your soul intact? Did you live from love? You already know the answer. And no matter how much noise the world makes, it can't drown out that knowing. That calm, grounded, undeniable knowing that you walked through hell with your heart still open, that you were good, not in theory but in practice. And maybe that means you were called a fool. So be it. Let them call you that. Let them point and whisper and doubt. Because one day, when the noise has passed, when the games are over, when the masks are too heavy to wear anymore, they'll remember you. They'll remember the way you made them feel safe, the way your silence held more wisdom than their loudest words, the way you never used your pain as a weapon. They'll remember your steadiness, your softness, your refusal to become cruel even when cruelty was offered first. And maybe they won't say it, maybe they'll never tell you, but somewhere in them something will shift. A thought, a feeling, a crack in the wall they spent their whole life building, and that crack will let the light in. Your light. The light of someone who chose truth over comfort, love over fear, compassion over control. That's not foolishness. That's legacy. That's impact. That's the kind of existence that doesn't end with applause or trophies, but with transformation. And you may never see the full ripple of what you've started, but you don't need to. Because you're not doing this for credit. You're doing it because it's who you are. You're doing it because anything else would be a betrayal of the truth that lives in you. And yes, it's hard, it's lonely, it's not glamorous, but it's real. And in the end, that's all that matters. Because real goodness doesn't expire, it doesn't vanish, it doesn't rust or rot or fade. It stays, in the way someone holds a child years after you held them that way, in the way someone speaks gently because you once did, in the way someone forgives themselves because you looked at them like they were already forgiven. That's what it means to be good in a world that calls good people fools. It means giving something eternal, something untouchable, something that outlives you, and that is the most powerful thing of all. Even if no one ever thanks you, even if no one ever truly understands the weight you carry just to remain kind, you are doing something sacred, because in every moment where you could have shut down, you chose to stay awake, you chose to feel, you chose to care. That is not ordinary. That is not common. That is not what this world has trained people to do. And yet you've done it anyway. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because something inside you refused to go numb. That refusal, that quiet, defiant refusal to become like the world around you is everything. It's what keeps humanity from falling into complete darkness. It's what lights the way, even when the light is faint. It's what gives others permission to soften, to breathe, to put their masks down for just a moment and remember who they really are. You do that. You've been doing that. Even when no one noticed. Even when they walked away. Even when they mocked your softness because they didn't have the courage to mirror it. And yes, there are days you wish you could unfeel. Days you wish you could be simpler, colder, easier to understand. Days where it feels like no one speaks your language. But those are the same days the world needs you most, because even if they don't speak your language, they feel your presence. Even if they don't understand your choices, they recognize your peace. Even if they can't explain why, something about you makes them stop and remember. Remember what it's like to not be performing. Remember what it's like to not be afraid. Remember what it's like to be loved without having to earn it. That's why Mishkin mattered. He didn't fix the world. He didn't win. He didn't overcome the cruelty around him. But he reminded people what it meant to be human, what it meant to be real, what it meant to be good, without needing a reason. That's what you're doing. You're not here to impress. You're here to remember. And to help others remember. And that kind of remembering doesn't always come with a crowd. It's often lonely. It often feels thankless, but it is never, ever without meaning, because every act of love creates a ripple. Every moment of compassion shifts the atmosphere. Every time you choose to respond with grace instead of ego, you create a possibility that didn't exist before. A crack in the concrete, a gap in the noise, a doorway into something more real. And yes, sometimes that door stays closed. Sometimes people aren't ready to walk through it. But the door is there, and that's enough. Because one day, when their world crumbles, when their walls collapse, when the image no longer sustains them, they'll remember the doorway. They'll remember you. And in that remembering, they'll take their first step toward truth. Maybe you've never thought of yourself as a healer. Maybe you've never seen your presence as sacred, but it is. Because you don't just exist, you affect. You enter rooms and things shift. You hold space without even trying. You carry stillness like a secret, and people feel it, whether they acknowledge it or not. You're not invisible. You're just ahead of your time. And time will catch up. So don't shrink, don't dim, don't try to contort yourself into the shape that makes others comfortable. Your light is not meant to be filtered through their expectations. It's meant to shine as it is. Bright, soft, unapologetic. Even if it blinds them, even if it scares them, even if they call it foolish, because the truth is, most people are not rejecting you. They are rejecting the version of themselves they don't want to face. And you, in your wholeness, reflect that version back to them. You show them the parts they buried, the parts they abandoned to survive. And that's not an easy thing to witness, but it's a necessary one. You are a mirror, a sacred reminder, a living testimony that the soul doesn't have to be sacrificed to succeed, that kindness is not weakness, that love is not naivety, that staying open is not a mistake, it's a miracle. And maybe you've been holding on to that miracle alone. Maybe it's gotten heavy. Maybe there are days when the silence feels louder than your hope. But you are not alone in this. You are not the only one who's felt too much, cared too deeply, or been told to tone it down. There are others. Other hearts like yours beating in rhythm beneath the surface. Other souls choosing truth over comfort even when it hurts. Other lights flickering in the dark just like you. You are not alone. You are part of something bigger than yourself. A quiet revolution. A sacred resistance. A lineage of the soft-hearted who refused to harden, no matter how much pressure the world applied. You belong to that legacy. You are carrying it forward. And every time you choose love over fear, you strengthen it. Every time you forgive, you expand it. Every time you tell the truth, even when your voice shakes, you anchor it into this world just a little more. And maybe you won't see the harvest. Maybe you won't see the fruit of your labor. Maybe your role is to plant seeds you'll never get to touch. But that's what good people do. They plant, they water, they trust, they love anyway. Not because it's easy, not because it's rewarded, but because it's right. Because it's who they are. And even if no one ever says it, thank you. Thank you for not giving up on your heart. Thank you for not trading it in for something safer. Thank you for standing in your truth even when it cost you. It may never call you a success, but somewhere deep in its quiet soul it will remember you, and that remembering will change everything. You may never hear in words, you may never read it in a message, but someone out there is living differently because of you. Someone is holding their tongue instead of speaking in anger. Someone is offering grace where they once only knew how to retreat. Someone is loving more gently, more bravely, because they once stood in your presence and felt something they couldn't explain. You are not a footnote. You are not a background character. You are not small. You are the turning point in someone else's quiet story. And you don't need to be perfect to play that role. You don't need to have it all figured out. Your doubt doesn't disqualify you. Your tiredness doesn't diminish your impact. Even your moments of breaking, those times when you feel too fragile to carry on, those moments are sacred too, because they show the world that staying soft doesn't mean being invincible. It means being honest, being real, letting yourself be seen, even in the middle of the storm. That's what Prince Mishken did. He never claimed to have the answers. He never claimed to be enlightened or wise. He simply loved, without conditions, without reward, without a script, and he suffered for it. He wasn't misunderstood because he lacked intelligence. He was misunderstood because his love didn't make sense to a world ruled by ego. Your love probably doesn't make sense either, because it doesn't follow logic. It doesn't demand anything in return. It shows up where it isn't deserved. It stays longer than expected. It forgives what others would deem unforgivable. And that kind of love, it doesn't just change people, it confronts them. It asks them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about strength and vulnerability and what it means to truly live. And not everyone is ready for that. Some people will reject it, some will try to twist it, some will tell you it's foolish to love without a contract. But they're not seeing clearly. They're not seeing what you're offering for what it really is. They see it through the lens of a world that only knows how to use and trade. And when something can't be used, it's called useless. When something can't be controlled, it's labeled dangerous. When something is pure, it's called naive. But you know better. You've seen the power of love that expects nothing. You've felt the healing in someone's presence when they asked for nothing in return. You've witnessed how a single act of compassion, freely given, can ripple through a life for years. That's the kind of force you carry. It's not loud, it's not glamorous, it's not always visible, but it's unstoppable. It's why people remember you even if they try to forget. It's why they think of you in the quiet moments. It's why they replay the words you said, the way you looked at them, the way you didn't leave when they thought you would. You are imprinted on souls, not through power, but through presence. And that presence isn't something you have to earn, it's not something you fabricate, it's who you already are. Underneath the doubt, beneath the ache, beyond the story that you're not enough. You are enough, you always were, not because of what you do, but because of what you carry. The world doesn't need more experts, it needs more humans, more realness, more willingness to sit in the mess and not run from it. More people who can hold sorrow in one hand and joy in the other and still choose to love. That's you. And maybe it feels like a burden, maybe it feels like too much some days. But you were made for this, not because you're perfect, but because you're honest, because you're willing to break and rebuild without becoming bitter, because somewhere in your soul you know the truth. Goodness isn't something to protect, it's something to live, even when it hurts, even when it's mocked, even when it looks like losing, because it's not really losing. It's letting go of everything false, everything temporary, everything that keeps you from your own heart. And in that letting go, something stronger is born. Something quieter, but deeper. A kind of power that doesn't need to be seen to be real. It's the power of someone who knows who they are, who doesn't need the world to approve before they act, who can look in the mirror and say, I didn't betray myself today. And that's worth everything. So if today you're tired, rest. If you're aching, breathe. But don't doubt the path you're on. Don't question the value of your kindness just because it hasn't been echoed back to you yet. Your love is not a question. It's the answer to 1,000 unspoken prayers. Your integrity is not invisible. It's building a world others don't yet know they need. You're not behind. You are not too late. You are not out of place. You are the quiet force beneath the noise, the stillness beneath the chaos, the truth beneath the mask. And no matter what they call you, you are not a fool. You are a reminder. You are a return. You are a reflection of something sacred, something ancient, something eternal. You may not wear robes or titles. You may not speak from a pulpit, but your life is a sermon. Your presence is a sacred text. And for those who have the eyes to see, you are already preaching the most beautiful truth of all, that it is still possible to live with an open heart in a world that has forgotten how to feel. And maybe that won't get you fame, maybe it won't get you followers, but it will give you peace. The kind of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, the kind of peace that settles deep in your bones, the kind that says, without needing to shout, I am here, I am whole, I am still loving, and nothing this world does will take that from me. So let them talk, let them misunderstand you, let them shake their heads and say you don't get it, because maybe you don't get their world, one built on pretending, performing, posturing, but that world was never meant for you anyway. You don't belong to the echo chambers. You don't belong to the hollow applause. You don't belong to the race that never ends and leaves everyone emptier with every mile. You belong to something quieter, older, deeper. You belong to truth. And truth doesn't argue, it doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't dress itself up to win favor, it just is. And that's what you are. A quiet truth in a noisy room, a candle lit in a world chasing fireworks, a still voice in the middle of the storm saying, you can be good, you can be soft, you can be real, and still survive. And not just survive, but live. Live with meaning, live with presence, live with a kind of integrity that can't be shaken by the day's headlines or someone else's opinion. Live with the courage to let your heart break open instead of shut down. Live like someone who understands that the pain of feeling is a small price to pay for the joy of being fully alive. You are not here to armor up. You are here to stay awake, to remember what others forgot, to be the thread of sincerity woven through a culture built on strategy, to hold the line even when your arms are tired, to love the unlovable, to believe when it seems irrational, to extend grace to those who don't yet know how to receive it. And yes, they will call you foolish, they will mock what they cannot comprehend, but their words are not prophecy, their labels are not truth. They are fear, disguised as cleverness, pain, cloaked in sarcasm, longing hidden beneath judgment. They're not responding to you, they're responding to what you stir in them, and what you stir is remembrance. The memory of innocence before it was sold, the memory of compassion before it was buried, the memory of self before it was traded for survival. You awaken that memory simply by existing, and for those who are ready, it heals. For those who are not, it threatens. Your concern is to remain true when it would be easier to adapt, to remain whole when the world tries to fracture you, to remain good not out of obligation but because it's your nature. Like a tree remains rooted in a storm, like the moon remains gentle even when the world turns violent. You don't need to prove the value of your light, just keep shining. You don't need to justify the depth of your care, just keep offering it. You don't need to explain why you can't be like everyone else, just keep being exactly who you are. Because that is your revolution, that is your resistance, that is your quiet, daily act of rebellion, and one day someone will look back and trace their healing to the moment they met you, to the day they heard your words, to the look you gave them when they felt invisible, to the kindness you offered when they had given up on being understood, and they will call you what the world never did. Wise, sacred, unshakable, not because you never fell, but because you fell and still refused to close your heart. Because you chose to be a mirror when it was safer to be a wall. Because you chose to love, again and again, even when it hurt. That is the truth beneath the title. Why good people are called fools, not because they lack wisdom, but because they carry a kind the world has forgotten. The kind that doesn't manipulate, the kind that doesn't demand, the kind that offers itself without armor. And it will always be misunderstood by those who believe strength must be loud. But you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be unmistakably you, and that is enough. So let them call you foolish. Let them misunderstand the way you love. Let them misinterpret your silence. Let them call your kindness a weakness, your compassion a flaw, because in time they will see. Maybe not today, maybe not while you're around, but one day, in the stillness, in the quiet spaces of their own becoming, they will remember you, and they will realize that the fool was the wisest one of all. And when that moment comes, your presence, your light, your truth will rise again in them, and they'll carry it forward. Because that's what goodness does. It multiplies, it echoes, it survives. Even when left behind, it survives, and so do you.